hope you guys are warming up. I'm going to shut the heat off again in a minute. You can only have one or the other. You get to hear or you get to freeze. So next we have.
Oh, Russ, I gotta grab an orange.
Okay, guys.
You're gonna have to turn the lights on and off. That just means you have to put the drink down, intermission's over.
I want to introduce you to Kurt Griesemer.
So close.
I said it wrong.
It's good enough.
And he works for Wisconsin Historical Society. I asked him his job title. He says his colleague calls him the jackknife of education. So maybe we'll go with that because I can't remember the others. Director of?
No, manager of TK-12 education initiatives, and I close my eyes so I can see it in my head because I did not make that up for myself. So my last one was
education specialist.
Coordinator of Primary Education, and the initials are COPE. It was my favorite title of all time.
There, yeah. So anyway, he is doing a program on education resources. He uses Dungeons and Dragons all the time in his. Oh, you can't hear me now. Okay. I said I was going to wait until we got started.
You could look up a microphone.
My hearing in my left ear is so bad I can barely
Thank
hear
you.
that. So.
Yes. So anyway, talks about education resources, place-based education, Dungeons and Dragons. I don't know exactly what we're going with today.
We're going to get
It's
all
going
of
to
those.
surprise us. And so I'm sure all of you are familiar with Dungeons and Dragons. I was hoping the assistant director was here today because that's her favorite thing. She plays it weekly online with her friends. I know Sarah's son plays it all the time. There's even a business in Rice Lake that's what they do. You go there, and it used to be a bookstore, I think, but now it's.
Yeah, it's called Boardwalk. They do board games and Dungeons and Dragons and, yeah.
So if you want to get kids' education, or get their attention, they're not going to be drawn to education, but you draw them to gaming and teach them some education that way, so
Yeah.
go ahead.
Thank you. There's a big movement, of course, right, to use games as educational tools, and so last year was the 50th anniversary of Dungeons and Dragons creation in Wisconsin, Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. Gary Gygax and Dave Arneson are the two founders. Dave Arneson from over there west of us in St. Paul, and Gary from Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. And so that's why we ended up creating D&D modules based around Wisconsin legend and lore and history. And so you can run into people like Bella LaFollette in there, you can run into the Hodag, you can run into both at the same time if you're unlucky. There's all sorts of things that were built into it, and then we have another one coming out at the end of April. But that's not where we're going to go right now. So I'm going to walk you through a bit of what we do with educators themselves. So we talk a lot to pre-service teachers, which is kind of our favorite market. Educators in general are stock and trade, right? But pre-service teachers, those professionals who are just getting out in the universities, getting out to their schools to get their first field experience, working with their professors still, that's a really great audience for us in education. And then I'll talk a bit about at the end, not even at the end, sort of toward the middle, about a project we're working on with DPI about place-based education in particular, where Chris McDaniel is working with the folks at Milton House to create field trip templates so that these templates can go out to schools and then they can come to a site and follow standards-driven experience. And what I'll say up front about that is it doesn't necessarily change anything you're doing or offering at your particular site. It just takes what you're doing and says this is how it lines up with what teachers need, right? So teachers have to meet certain expectations and certain standards. How many of you were educators or are educators? See, so you know, right? There's all sorts of things that teachers have to line up and cross T's and dot I's with. And so the place-based education piece that we're working on together is really just a way of doing that, making sure that if an administrator says, why are you going here? The teacher can say, we're going here because it helps me do this in the classroom. So, but this is how we start talking to teachers. We talk about the society writ large. And aside from Janet, raise your hand if you've been to our building on the square, or not even on the square, I should say, that one's gone. Down on the campus, Yeah, a few of you. So we have our motto that says we collect, preserve, and share the story of Wisconsin. One of the projects that I get to run is Hands-on History, and Hands-on History is bringing stuff, the stuff of history, right? Artifacts based around certain themes that I know teachers are teaching in their classroom, and then holding them up and asking kids if they know what they are. And then we have great conversations, and it's all story-driven, so once you know the stories of a particular theme or location or space, that works out really well too. So my job, despite all the titles that we just rattled off, is basically to share, right? I'm the sharer of stuff, and my main audience, being primary education, is pre-K to about 6th grade, and after that, we just cast them loose into the wilderness and hope for the best. It's not true. I write a lot I do a lot of content writing for the society, so I'm working on the textbook, 3rd edition right now, and I'm on chapter 14 of 14 in the latest draft. And so I'm very excited. I had a meeting with my editor yesterday on chapter 13's remarks, and I don't have to write any more on chapter 13. So it's been a long process, as you might guess, doing the textbook, in addition to publishing 2 adventure modules based on D&D history and going around the state. I do get to travel and see the state of Wisconsin in my job, and I really enjoy it. So this time I was coming, I used to live in Columbia Heights outside of Twin Cities, so I stayed with friends last night and drove all the way back here on Highway 8. It's just awesome, you know? It's just a great thing to do.
What is your textbook? Is it for 4th grade history?
It's going to be for grades 3 through 5. Yep. So usually, traditionally, Wisconsin history is taught in the 4th grade, but that changes depending. Wisconsin is a huge local. It is a local control state. So every school district, every board has the authority to sort of say this is how and what and when we're teaching things. So the district I was just in the other day, they do social studies on a flip of quarters, right? So they don't do social studies one quarter, then they'll do it in another quarter, rather than like me may have gone to school and kind of got this a little bit, 45 minutes here, 45 minutes there. So, so it's written for 3rd to 5th grade. We're trying to sort of broaden the idea of what we're teaching in that book. So in the 3rd grades, we'd love to see them using it to start talking about Indigenous education, right? Indigenous peoples, the first peoples of Wisconsin, the Native nations that are still here with us today, right? So we'd love to have that sort of start earlier so they can get a deeper understanding of who was here before us. So
Is it a social studies text or is it a history text?
it's, well, that's, to me, they're the same thing. So we teach.
Social studies encompasses a lot.
Yeah. So the standards. If you go online, I've broken down our 2nd edition textbook into all the standards, and we hit quite a few. I think we might be light on econ, and we try to stay away from politics. I mean political science. But in general, obviously a lot of history, a lot of behavioral sciences. Why do people do the crazy things they do? Why did the people past do the crazy things they did, right? Geography is built into the book. So it's more of a social studies book, but it's marketed as a Wisconsin history book. It's also got a strong lit foundation. So literacy, since, I don't know anymore, maybe under President Obama, there's been a huge push for reading and mathematics in the classroom, and that money has taken away from everything else, right? So if you only have one pool of money and you take it away from the humanities, it goes to STEM, and so STEM has benefited, and so has literacy. And so the textbook itself has a grounding in different forms of literacy instruction. So we're going to work on that again. We're going to work with teachers coming up to start creating new activities, because as this draft gets finished, it's going out to Native scholars for a review, and then we'll be working on an entire, so not only are stories of everyone in Wisconsin that we could think of woven into it, and my editor just said the last chapter is way too long, I don't know what to tell her. So, but we also have a chapter just dedicated to the current Native nations in Wisconsin. So there's a scholarly review going on right now for that. So it's been fun and difficult, but it'll get done. And we hope to have it out in 27, 28. So Janet may have told you already that the new Wisconsin History Center is still on track to open in 27. And the textbook is somewhere around that. Thankfully, I don't have to worry about it. Once I get done with my writing, I can sort of go, that's great.
Thank you and good luck.
Yeah, thank you. It'll be fun. Right. So this is what I ask teachers. Raise your hand if you were born in Wisconsin. All right, that's all right. My oldest has to, in fact, both my kids, I think, have to say they were born in Minnesota.
Yeah.
And my daughter moved here when she was less than 3 weeks old, so, Raise your hand if you're born elsewhere, but your family moved here. Okay. You moved here on your own. For whatever reason, here you are. You plan on staying, so you can tell I'm talking to pre-service teachers, right? You plan on staying after graduation, and then my favorite, you plan on leaving after graduation as fast as you possibly can. Right? And I get hands for all of those, and I get it. Wisconsin may not have been your dream destination once you're done with your schoolwork. So here is kind of a fun thing. Because you're all Wisconsin history professionals, I'm going to skip this. All right? Because I bet you can come up with some really great facts and share them. Although it'd be cool if you know what, maybe we shouldn't skip it and see if you can surprise the person next to you. So just take a minute and cover your work so no one copies you, and write down an interesting fact you know about Wisconsin that you think your neighbor doesn't know. Go for it. I know, you're thinking, what? Homework already? That's all right. Just jot it down, and you're going to share that with your neighbor in a second. So once you're ready, I'll look and see when heads are mostly up, just like a teacher would do, or if you're just talking with each other and done with the work. All right. Okay, so find someone to talk to that you think you can surprise with your fact. Go for it. I'll list mine. Pretty simple.
You know a lot.
Thanks. This is the art for the cover of the first one. Yeah, I'll go grab it. I had stuff. These are too modern. Feel free to leave this.
Did you know that Wisconsin
All right. Oh, all of you have been out of kindergarten too long. So, raise your hand if you learned something new from your neighbor. Oh, that's awesome. All right, who would like to share their cool, interesting fact that they learned?
Oh, Interstate Park is the oldest state park in Wisconsin.
Oh.
Yes, it is.
Celebrating 125 years in October? September.
Oh, it's such a beautiful park too. When we used to live up here.
But what the puzzle is, it's not the first state park, but it's the oldest.
All right, how does that work
That's the
out?
riddle. They started one over in Oneida County and it failed.
Okay.
So then they went to Interstate Park, so that became the oldest, but not the first. There's the riddle of the day.
Who else has a cool fact? Yes.
Two things. Number one, as you pointed out to me, Luck was the home of Duncan Yo-Yo between 1946 and 1965, and also that Luck was the first member of the Wisconsin Cooperative Dairy, which was the first in the nation, 1885, driven by a woman from Denmark.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm not being so, but I think Joe Kapler is our curator crazy about co-op history, right? Like if I recall correctly, he insists on, if you talk, and silos, also very passionate about silo history. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe he's moved on. Mine is that D&D was created here in '74 by Gary Gygax and Dave Arneson, and like I say, now you know 2 interesting facts about Wisconsin if you didn't know like a bazillion more from being who you are, right? But we can always learn from each other. I think that's kind of the fun thing. As a teacher, it was great if a student, I used to teach, 5th grade was sort of my sweet spot. I really loved 5th and 6th graders. And they'd come up and say, do you know blah, 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 blah? And I'd be like, nope. And they'd stare at me and said, right, you should go look that up and then tell me and we'll tell the class to be honest. All right, and so it's really fun to learn from each other. And so when we think about it, when we're talking to people, when you want to convince educators to come to your space, right? Why? Why should they do it? What's good for them about it? And so we think in terms of inquiry questions. What matters, why does it matter, and how do we know? Come from an inquiry method called thinking like a historian. Is anybody familiar with our thinking like a historian work that we've done? A few of you?
Pass this around.
Yes, please do. So I have a, and you can, like I said, feel, and shrink wrap's my enemy too, like I can never open shrink wrap. Those are the two D&D modules being passed around based on Wisconsin history. So that inquiry method, thinking like a historian, Bobby Malone, who worked with us for many years in the 90s and 2000s, and Nikki Mandel, freshman, and they, unfortunately, Bobby never held the copyright, and we don't hold the copyright, and so we're moving past that with our new edition of the textbook and materials coming out. So in 27, 28, we'll have a new form. I mean, inquiry doesn't change, it's all asking good questions, right? That's not going to change. It's all about asking good questions. It's just the primary colors and some other things will be going away. So teaching Wisconsin history can help you to teach culturally. Years and years ago, I came up with a group of teachers to experience actually this section of the world of Wisconsin, right? These sort of northwestern, mid-central, mid-north, and up. And one of the places that stuck with me forever is Barron, which I just drove through again and thought about my experience going to Barron, Wisconsin. It was fairly recently after Genio had moved employees from their plant that they had closed to, offering to help move them to Barron. And the Somali population had grown, obviously, quite quickly. And there were 2 mosques we visited that day. And just the manager, so we had a kind of a big round table with them. And the manager tearing up, talking about how much he's enjoyed working with these families and getting to know them and their culture and the things that they brought to the table. And when we drive through Barron downtown and see different stores obviously catering to a population that was not here, I think at that point, like 2 years or less, a year or less ago, right? So, and driving through Barron, I see a sign pointing to the Islamic Center, right, of Barron. And I think, wow, that's just awesome that it's like carried on. And so teaching culturally means so many different things, even in northwestern Wisconsin, right? Like who's going to guess, if they're not from around here, that that's a population that is central to the economy, right? Central to the culture, central to, just being a fabric in the community. So teaching culturally is incredibly important. Teaching locally is what you do, right? Local historical societies, local museums. How many of you are volunteers? How many of you are the only volunteer? I know, close, right? I met Russ and Nancy, whose last name's escaping. I run into them at every local history conference. They run the Cambridge Historic Middle School. I live in Cambridge. And I had not met them yet when I got a call from Nancy saying, hey, we're planning on we want to get more kids. We're right here at the middle school and the elementary school is just down the road. We can't interest them in coming. What do we need to do? I said, oh, I live in Cambridge. I'll stop by. I'll stop by after work. And so I left work a little early and got there about 4:30, thinking I'd be home by 5:30, and I got home at 8:30. It was great. Nancy and Russ had so many ideas to work with, and so we got her connected with the high school business teacher because they needed help with data entry on whatever that is. It past perfect? There's some sort of program folks have to use. So not only were the kids then learning data entry skills and how past perfect works, they were working with the local historical society to help them get something done that they needed to. We looked at their collections and thought about the stories we could tell, and then the weird case of that somebody just donated a whole bunch of stuff from one time they had a trip to Japan. So we're not sure what they're going to do with that particular story, but how many of you have things that don't fit your collections and yet they're there anyway because somebody, right? One time we added a couch to the museum collection because someone left it out front. Now we use that couch. I'm not making this up. If you ever see our photos of Evergleam, where they are on a couch and there's presents, that's the couch. It's pretty great. So anyway, but things happen. So teaching locally, teaching your local history, getting them involved, right? Getting them to understand that this is a place with a history of its own, and yet it's still part of the greater story. I think that's the hardest part to make sure that we do, is we attach our stories of our places to what is happening outside of those places, so that there's a resonance, so that there's a, especially when you get past the 4th grade audience, which is of course Wisconsin history, 5th grade, 6th grade on, they start learning national and world history. So making sure that there's connections between these pieces of local and national. I'll show you some good examples of that we came up with as we go. And of course, I just mentioned it, teaching nationally. Does everybody know what Milton House is famous for? You're a ringer, but sure. What do you got?
The Underground Railroad.
The Underground Railroad, right? Huge story with national implications, right? Men and women who are heroes. And so it ties really well with this idea that not only is this a United States cultural history story, it is an incredible local history story, and it ties to this greater national struggle that was going on, right? Pre-Civil War and into the Civil War era, and onward from there. So, when did Wisconsin become a state? We have like one of the very few flags where you can just look at it and get the right answer. So I always ask kids that as I'm showing them the flag, and then they never look at the flag, they're always looking at me. I'm like, it's right here. It also rhymes, so it's nice. When did Wisconsin become a state? 1848. So if you are particularly into rhymes and music, you can set that to song. So one of the things that we try to do is ground our work in the idea of indigenous history being tens of thousands of years old. So right now, we have proof of indigenous history going back 14,000 years. Does anybody know what we could possibly have that proves that people were in Wisconsin 14,000 years ago? Yes.
Projectile points, or?
Not just points, because the points without this other stuff would be sort of hard to date because there's rock, right?
Yeah, bones.
Is that that canoe they found in Mendota?
There's actually it's canoes all the way down, it turns out. But yeah, Janet was the first one 1,200 years old, and then a 3,000-year-old one,
Right.
and then more were not going to disturb. So for some reason, canoes ended up over millennia in this same area, which is, I know we can't say Bermuda Triangle with a straight face, but it's interesting, right? Why did that happen? What was it like? So it's not that. So that was only 1,200 years ago, 3,000. But bones. So what happened is a farmer, I think near Kenosha, because they're the ones who got to keep it at the museum, was plowing their field and got knocked off their tractor because they hit mammoth bones, right? So, and the mammoth bones turned out not to just have plow marks on them, which they did then, but they had cut marks on them, and they had some projectile points and some stone tools nearby, and they dated up what they found, and they found that it goes back 14,000 years. So that's a long time for people to think about. When I give a presentation called First People in the Fur Trade, I start off by telling the kids we're going to cover 14,000 years of human history. Ready? Go! And then we just take off, and they look at me like I'm nuts, and by the time we're done, we don't get 14,000 years because we stop after the fur trade. But, you know, little lies. So the canoes, though, Bill Quackenbush, the Ho-Chunk Tribal Historic Preservation Officer, Bill, we got a documentary company called Purple Onion to do some filming as we were working on these canoes, because it's just a huge deal. And Bill's basic statements are, the Ho-Chunk have been here since time immemorial, and I'm going to paraphrase, science is finally catching up. Right? Like they've known, the Ho-Chunk have known that they have been there. They have oral histories dating back as far back as they can remember, right? And those stories are being proven true every day, right? So those canoes are simply another like piece of saying, yes, we were here, we have always been here, and science is finally catching up with us. And I'd like to use this story to talk about how archaeology and indigenous history of oral histories are not opposed to each other, right? So many people, you will preference one or the other. They actually are incredibly complementary to telling a really good story, you know? And so teaching culturally is a great way to think about how we do that. In Madison, in 1967, there were huge protests of Dow Chemical Company, and Dow, if I'm not mistaken, is the chemical company responsible for Agent Orange, among other things that were happening. And it was basically a job fair, right? And the students who were opposed to the Vietnam War staged a huge demonstration, and it's a great way to teach locally about what was happening, and then asking questions. You know, what right are the students exercising? What responsibilities are inferred from that right? Like, students exercising the right to protest still have responsibilities, right? You have a responsibility to keep it as safe and peaceful and calm as possible, right? You can be angry and shouty without being destructive, right? There's all these pieces that are inferred that we talk to kids about. How is the right to protest protected in the United States, right? That First Amendment right to free speech, as long as it is not harmful speech, is protected. So that's a right that they're exercising. And then what other ways can people be civically engaged? And when you ask young people this question, who are under the age of 18, they stare at you kind of like, I don't know. And the easiest answer is you are civically engaged if you look around outside and decide that you and your friends are going to help pick up garbage because you see some garbage on the street. You are civically engaged if you identify a problem in your community and figure out who's responsible for that problem. I was fascinated when I would walk down, I was a kindergartner in Milwaukee, and on garbage day I'd walk down the end of the driveway and there'd be a garbage can full of garbage there, and when I came home the garbage was gone. Where did it go? Who wanted the garbage? That's weird. Well, invite the local garbage collectors in. They're part of the community and they are incredibly important to how we live as a society, right? Those sanitation workers are the folks that make sure that we are enjoying our comfortable streets. And when I bike by full garbage cans on trash day, I know it, right? So inviting community members is a really great way to think about how else you can be civically engaged. There are many ways to be civically engaged without protesting. You can write letters, you can make phone calls, you can organize community cleanups. There's all sorts of things. So in your local historical societies, you can think of what else can we do to get people involved in what we're doing. Think of projects that are a little outside the box. That is why I'm not going to the entire thing with the D&D presentation, because it's way outside the box. But I'll show you how you can use that too, for those who are interested in creating adventures. Of course, you can teach nationally. Does anybody recognize that painting? American Progress was in my history textbooks growing up, because it was the illustration of manifest destiny. And manifest destiny, that sea to shining sea idea of American culture going across, and you know, here you can see Native Americans being chased away, right, by the great civilization. Little do you know, maybe, that this manifests in our territorial seal. So not this one in particular, which is my favorite. How are we going to get people to come to Wisconsin? I don't know, show them a pickaxe and a pile of lead. Okay, that's what I'm drawing. So anyway, that lasted like a year. And the next territorial seal, in fact, I like this, 1836 to 1836. So they looked at this first one and like, not so. This is the one that is influenced by this idea. And I know it's kind of small on this screen, so I'm just going to point out that you have, of course, you've got your farmers, right? You've got shipping over here. You've got First Capital, soon to be ignored, sorry, First Capital. And you've got a Native American with feathered headdress and bow and arrow facing west. And you've got the phrase, civiltas secessit barbarum, civilization over barbarianism, which is a pretty privileged thing to say. So if you think about, what's that?
They should have built a wall.
Right? I love those cartoons. Some of my favorite. But the idea that manifest destiny is a national idea really influenced the settlement or colonialization. Again, those are two sides of the same coin, right? Of Wisconsin, and what influenced our state territorial seals, like trying to show, don't worry, white Americans can come and settle here, it's gonna be fine, and there's a ton of lead in the ground. I mean, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, but show up for lead. And it causes the end of native dominance in Wisconsin. So about 1837, the Ho-Chunk signed one of their last major treaties with the United States, and they lose everything. And they're forced out of Wisconsin. The Dakota are forced out of Wisconsin. The Ho-Chunk, of course, come back. They refuse to abandon their ancestral homes. But their mines are taken over by squatters that we call the Badgers, who are also influential in causing the Black Hawk War in years previous, right? So this idea that there were treaties being signed and white settlers decided that they were going to ignore the treaties anyway did happen. And that's history that we can talk about and find you the factual basis on. And then, of course, our current seal, which is kind of a hot mess. Does anybody know why our seal is not maybe artistically awesome?
Well, back at the time it was artistically awesome, but now it's politically maybe incorrect.
Oh, politically maybe it's a thing, but I mean, just the artwork on it, what is that supposed to be?
Well, wasn't it school kids?
Nope, it was not school kids. What happens is they have an artist design the state seal, and we will never know what that was. Because the governor at the time, you know, I've been doing history a long time, I should have looked it up, whatever his name was, goes off to New York with the state seal, sits down and meets the Supreme Court Justice from Wisconsin, I don't know why they're both there, probably to get this registered, and they hate it. And they crumple it up and they draw a new one. And neither one of them is an artist. And it's one of my favorite stories, right? And what did that one look like that the artist drew? We don't have a copy. So we have I'm almost certain that this was a beaver.
Yeah.
And they were like, okay, if we just change, you know, it's a little fat, but in brown, and the tail's wrong, but we're going to just make it a badger. And then everything else, they were like, well, what else are we doing in Wisconsin? By 1848, lead mining was already on the way out. All right? It was harder. They had already gotten all the easy to get lead. I saw your 2,200-pound piece of copper out there. That is incredibly impressive. So cool. Because I'm a history nerd. So, but the idea that lead mining features so prominently on our state seal, by that time they knew the industry was ending. The fur trade and not represented at all, which is sort of, you know, the Samuel de Champlain, Brule, and eventually we used to think it was Nicolet that was here first. He was not. Great book called Misunderstood Adventures of Jean Nicolet to check out from the society about what really happened within his story. Anyway, all of these things, history, politics, art, personal preferences of the two people sitting on the stoop, redrawing the seal, right? That all plays into what you can teach kids about Wisconsin. So when you think about your facts that you shared, you should think about how they help you to do these things. Like, do your facts help you teach culturally? Do they help you teach locally? How do they help you teach nationally? So just take a few minutes and think, if you were talking to educators, would those facts be something that would be attractive to them? Right? And how would you do that? And you can work with each other. You can pick one of the two facts you've thought on, but just take about 5 minutes and plot out, like, what does it mean if you want to teach the culture of what you just found out, right? What does it mean if you want to teach from the local to the national? And think about this in particular. These ties, they should all tie together in some way, right? There should be some way of linking these ideas. So 5 minutes seems long, I know, but by the time you start talking and everything, you won't have enough time. So, go ahead.
On a national scale, just how over the years and how people suddenly wear yeah, like less. And one thing also,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
so they're
Shame that you've been out of bed before.
I just have a quick question. So, just out of curiosity, I know you kind of mentioned you did things for like pre-K students, but do you have anything for like early childhood development? Like, so for example, my son is 4, but he's still like kind of, he's still like right at the tail end, you know, the Sandy Care experience. And so I've been thinking about like if there was a way I could do something like this preschool, or not even just preschool, just daycare with some kids there, but they're like anywhere from, I would assume they would probably match those 2 to 3 and 4-year-olds together, so you have kids like all sorts of developmental stages.
We've done a few different things for them, mostly with hands-on history, because so that educators would want to bring their kids and pay attention.
Okay, they're convincing me over here. I was just babbling. I don't even know if I understood.
I do that professionally, you can ask Janet.
I don't even know if I understood your assignment. Okay. Since I am officially a transplant, I am not a transplant from anywhere in the States. I'm a transplant from overseas. I took it from the point that we're all teachers here, actually, in one way, form, or another, whether you have a teaching background or not. And I looked at this assignment from the context of migration and immigration. And I'm going to see if I can explain what I was talking about to these wonderful women. So, I took the Wisconsin Cooperative Creamery as my example.
Okay.
Okay, I had to pick something.
Yeah.
So back in the late 1800s, you got migration and turning into immigration of people coming here to, they started with logging. Logging was finished. They cut down all the trees they could. Turns into agriculture. Agriculture gets built on. In Wisconsin, they started a cooperative creamery. One of the things that happened with the creamery is that the butter that they made was actually shipped out to New York. New York loved the butter from the area because of whatever qualities. Time goes on, we're teaching the kids this in our schools, that this is, the dairy industry was strong. 1937, I'm moving to. Dairy industry is still going on here. Things are changing to modernize. You have, from the late 1800s onward, you have industrialization in Europe with a very quick growth of industry, and the industry grows quicker than population. So that's one of the reasons you have the migration, people leaving to get better lives. They come over here, building on, and I don't want to say nothing, but they don't have the crowded communities that we had in Europe. Okay, so you have ample place to build up here. In the early part of the century, 1920s and so forth, you have people starting with industrialization in Minnesota. You've got, for instance, a company called Land O'Lakes that has eventually got the name Land O'Lakes through lots of work. They were looking for expansion in Minneapolis. They found a place up in Luck where they actually built a factory for the first dry milk packing factory. This is all part of culture that's continuing from the cooperative in Luck that brought with it a culture of Danish creamery making. So that's what we've been teaching our kids in school about the dairy industry, not necessarily specifics. But
Right, but what great ties, I mean, you've taken the basic story, I always ask kids, what, if you're from Wisconsin, what do people always know about Wisconsin when you talk to them?
exactly.
So you've taken that story and you've tied it to local history, local culture, it's still a national and it's an international
Yes.
story. It talks about the waves of migration and immigration, you could branch off anywhere with that, right? But that is fantastic, and using, and the story gets so big so fast, right? To keep it to you and your space, keep tying those local places, those local people, right? Find out who those folks were. My friend Shannon worked for Land O'Lakes for a while, and so we always joke about how she works for the company on the wrong side of the river, right? So, you know. But the dairy industry in Wisconsin and this particular region in general, the odds of it happening without prime motivation, right? Like logging's gone, the chinch bugs have eaten the wheat, and the farmers didn't really understand if you plant the same thing over and over again, everything dies, right? So, but that's a great story, right? And again, you've tied it to all these different things that teachers need to teach in their classroom. You've just used very specific examples that are interesting. I mean, we often think that I mean, I loved history as a kid, and the history that matters the most is the ones that you can show impact them, right? Like, why does it matter to me? And I know that's, I mean, we're all a little narcissistic. Everybody look in the mirror this morning? I did. You know, about 17 times before I headed out with this. So you just, in the end, right, but you just, kids are no different. They want to know, why does this matter to me? What is this, what's important about this, right? And it's our job to make that matter to them. It's their job then to take that information and who knows what they'll do with it next. But if we can make it matter to them, they're going to remember that moment a little bit more, right? You had your hand up, you wanted to share?
Oh, you know, I'm just thinking about, we talked about, you know, what the population was like here before Europeans were here. In, you know, Turtle Lake, we're surrounded by lakes. I mean, you can go, you know, 15 minutes in, you know, in any direction and have a good lake to fish on. But every one of those lakes had a village site on it.
Right.
And, you know, we know that because, well, I know that. I walk fields and I find artifacts all over the place. And so, but at the time it was, you know, these big pine forests. So Europeans saw this, you know, as an opportunity, and the government sold the land, or yeah, to the railroads, and railroads came in and made it possible for people to infiltrate into, you know, that area and spread out, you know, chasing the native people off the land that they traditionally had always lived on. And, you know, so, and that just kept on happening. So it was a domino effect that, you know, one culture would move in and push the next one out. So then native cultures kind of did that amongst themselves too, is that those tribal people, you know, moved the next group over, you know, and kept going further west. You know, and they ended up on little reservations. And so, you know, that was true of the whole country. And, you know, social studies lesson is man's inhumanity to man, and, you know, that, you know, manifest destiny, all this.
It all ties together,
Yeah.
right? From the local
Yeah.
people living here at that, and it's hard history, right? So
Yeah.
teaching it with a bit of empathy, thinking about how does this impact, because you're going to have native students.
Right.
Right.
Well, the other thing is that when I was going to school in Turtle Lake, occasionally we would have a native student come in, and they would stay maybe a month or two, and then they would be gone, because the cultures didn't,
Yeah, just a mesh.
yeah.
Mhm.
So, anyway, you know, the reservations, and, you know, we've got, you know, a few reservation kinds of areas in the area. And, why are those people not, why can't we just have them go to school?
Right, and it all goes back to treaties and treating them as sovereign nations, right? And that idea is still held fast and strong.
Yeah, but it's one of the ideas that is rarely taught,
Mhm.
in the schools.
Right.
It's, there's an act, what's Act 30?
Act 31?
Yeah, that there's supposed to be infusing native culture into every lesson that you teach. And that rarely happens.
Right, and that's one of the things that we get asked a lot about. Do you have resources? And we do, actually. So the Wisconsin Historical Society has Hattie Lowe's fantastic work, Indian Nations of Wisconsin, in its second edition. I did an education packet, so that's for secondary, so middle and high school. And then Native Peoples of Wisconsin is Patty's and Bobby Malone's work based on her original piece, which is more of an elementary model. So we always call that one the little orange book with the blue binding, right? So Native Peoples has built-in education lessons, and the teacher's guide is available for free on Wisconsin Nations First org. So we do have resources that we're trying to, the more people know about them, the more they use them. And it can be tricky because you want partnerships is what you want, right? Yeah. And so the more ways you can reach out and say, how can we work together to bring our kids together? Like there are schools now that cater to indigenous populations right alongside schools that are catering to the standard education base, right, in Wisconsin. So how can they get together and share what they're doing? Language instruction is huge because saving languages. I mean, there's all these stories. So you've got a huge story. So the more local you can get it, there's a professional archaeology joke my friend Amy Roseborough told me. How do archaeologists find a site? They follow the plow. So, but the idea that you've got this local history that goes back thousands of years all the way to today, and there's conflict and resolution, and there's trying to figure out how to live together, right? All these things are still true. They're still happening. Mm-hmm. And so, but there's been progress and there's been setbacks, and I mean, it's just a rich story to try and tell, so.
Manifest Destiny gets an update with Greenland, right?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. What? Sorry. So we have, of course, great resources. This is our beautiful library over here on that side. This is our not quite so beautiful old reading room. Now it looks nicer. They've got new furniture and stuff. They're very happy with it. And so you can come visit. Is it UW Eau Claire? Is that going to be the closest ARC to us?
Or Menominee.
Menominee? So, yeah.
They're both the same.
If you can't get to Madison to view archival resources, those one-of-a-kind documents, we are the most public of public archives. We will get them to the area archive resource center near you. And so if that's Menominee, you can say, okay, I'm going to go figure out what I need, have that shipped up, and I don't know, they used to tell me it took less than a week to get anything shipped around because they constantly have trucks going around the state. So it's just like the interlibrary loan system in its own way. Whereas you can go in the library, if they don't have the book, they can get it shipped from another library.
I think River Falls had one. I don't know.
River Falls has one. Eau Claire has one. If you're more towards Superior, you've got the Great Lakes Northern Visitor Center up that way. So, in fact, there's all the stars showing where they are. So, those are our three in this area here. And again, it's very similar to a library system where you find a resource you need and they will ship it so you don't have to make the drive down to Madison or Milwaukee where we have a lot of our artifacts, like on the Civil Rights Movement, they have a lot of the archival pieces there. So, question, what fraction of our collections is on display?
1%.
Trick question, we don't have a museum right now. Thank you. It is a flat spot with a bunch of cranes and wire fencing, and it's so funny how things never change. We saw a crew trying to make sure bricks weren't falling off the building next to us. So, our building's gone, but we used to have netting holding our tile onto the building because it was falling off and endangering people. Now the building that they exposed, all that brick, of course, the pointing is shot. So, they've got, anyway, the more things change. So, what fraction do you think, what percentage do you think is of our archives are available online? Archives number, by the way, I'll just give you hints, in the hundreds of thousands of documents and maybe millions.
Generally, it's 20% for most museums.
Less than 1%.
Online.
Less than one. So archival documents, right, they have to be scanned in, they have to be interpreted, they have, and then they do this, but it takes a whole digital reference library to do this work. So it can be tough to explore our collections online sometimes. Of course, our sites and museums. When I first made this presentation, I was told that I should maybe take that off, and I said, no, it's fine, and now it's been on there for years. So, you know, it is a work in progress. And in 27, we're going to have a shiny new Wisconsin History Center with a permanent exhibit on Dungeons and Dragons. Thank you.
So, you know, I'm looking at this map, and, you know, history only happened in the southern half of Wisconsin.
I know.
There was nothing up here.
What happened?
Yeah, nothing. It was just a vacuum. It was
Here, and I make a joke about Florence County. There's, you know, where, you know, Jerry Apps is from. It turns out there was some history happening, or Jerry wouldn't be writing about it all the time.
yeah.
Janet, you are probably way more familiar with how we end up with sites where we do. So can you talk a little bit about that? I mean, I know the basics of it, but put you on the spot, sorry.
Oh, that's okay.
I'll buy you the coffee.
So at the time that the State Historical Society acquired a lot of official state historic sites, it was a period of like the 1960s, 70s, 80s. And so there were different processes or criteria than we would use today for determining how, you know, what specific historic site would become part of WHS. And so some of it is a little bit of chance, I think, of happenstance. I mean, Old World Wisconsin specifically was a response of the bicentennial, 1976. Old World Wisconsin was created and became a state historical site. Others were acquired along the way when they were offered to the Historical Society. So now we have a much more robust process for evaluating potential sites that we would operate. Because as you all know, even small sites take a lot of staff, volunteers, financial commitment. And so the newest sites that we have acquired around the state, one in Reed School in Neilsville, Clark County, as well as Black Point Estate in Lake Geneva.
My graphic won't appear for Black Point, I'm very sad. It's over here.
Those in the last, like say, 10 to 20 years were acquired by WHS. Those were acquired along with a sizable endowment, either from state or private funding, to help with the operations of those sites. And so the map looks a little bit haphazard because it reflects kind of a time period of the 1960s through 80s, where today we might have different criteria like regional diversity or representation of stories. And so I always like to think that the map reflects just part of all of the wonderful history that's preserved in Wisconsin, and all of the affiliates, like all of you, fill in that map. So if we overlay affiliates on that map, it's a fantastic,
Oh, right.
you know.
Yeah.
So working in partnership, we cover the map. And don't forget about that arrow way up to Madeline Island Museum, there, Ashland County.
So beautiful.
Yep.
But there's so much more.
There it is. Yeah. You know, in fact, this is free. Did you bring your handy map of Wisconsin history with you? I'm so disappointed. Take your right hand and go like this. And then turn around and look at your hand. That's your handy map of Wisconsin history. Because it's your hand. It's a map. Door coming? Okay. That's a dad joke that I give the kids for free. Sorry. Janet's taking notes on me right now. History in the making. So we have the History Makerspace in Madison. So we don't have a museum, so we don't have exhibits up. So what we've done is gone to experiential programming. So much like my Hands-on History program, except when teachers come to us, they spend time exploring the questions in Wisconsin history. They start with a little primer kind of based around the 14,000 year idea into the state seal and what all those things mean. And then they get to discover through artifacts and archival pieces the story of Wisconsin, ending with them creating, and every class does this successfully, a museum exhibit along a wall. So they put up an object and they have to just write one sentence on a little erasable thing about why did they choose that object? You know, what do you like? Why is this important? And we get all sorts of cool things from Packer footballs drawn. I mean, if we don't happen to have it, they can draw whatever they want. They can make it out of clay. We have clay for them. And we also have 2 bins full of artifacts for them to pick through and images. This is my Hands-on History program in action. Playing a game of Snow Snake over there. That's actually from the pilot. That's a long time ago, I can tell you. And it was great fun, but we're piloting Hands-on History in that one. This is in a Milwaukee classroom. She's just the most awesome, photogenic kid of all time, holding a giant mammoth tooth, which was fascinating.
Wow.
And I love this photo because you see how she's making that ew, ick face? In the next one in this series, she is just excited. She's got the pelt in her hands and she is just smiling and laughing. So Hands-on History is all about taking artifacts to classrooms and having kids discover the story of the theme. So one theme is First People in the Fur Trade. My themes are very broad. Wisconsin, jobs. Wisconsin, journeys, right? And Wisconsin, archaeology. So those are the main themes that I work with to help teach kids history. In-class virtual programming, so we do offer virtual programs in the classroom, and this is just a very small sample of them. And then of course our press has all sorts of materials, and this is not a press release, and I only say that to indemnify them from anything you don't like about it. So, but they never did gaming materials, and so they weren't able to help us with this in particular. So, but it does come out from the society and from education in general, and those 2 pieces should have gone around. These are all, so of course we've got the textbook 2nd edition, Ogeechee Storytellers in partnership with DPI, Great Lakes Fish and Wildlife folks. Juanita Adams, I work with her family, her daughter and her niece, a lawyer and an educator, came to the society and said, my mom, this is Sheila, my mom was an activist during the Civil Rights Movement. We have these awesome photos of her pregnant holding back a steam engine or a plow or something like that. I'm like, you have a what? Anyway, so we developed an entire education curriculum based around the Juanita Adams story. We have video of her speaking, doing an oral history on that page. We have another video shot of the daughters and nieces all just getting together and talking about their mom who had passed away a few years back. And it is a joy to watch and to see a family so affected by their mom's personal history, right? Turning points. This is one of our oldest pieces on our website, so I would take a picture of it now because it's probably going to be gone in a few months. We're revamping our website and we are moving turning points into it in some way or another. But when that 1% of archival pieces, a lot of them are in this collection. And they're designed around the things educators need to teach. So the whole collection is based on eras and themes in Wisconsin history that teachers need to teach. And so that 1%, a lot of it's represented in here, which is why it's really hard to move around. So, National History Day in Wisconsin is, of course, our program for academic competition. I'm sure you've heard that nationally the funding has been cut, but that does not affect the society's programs. So the state competition will still be happening. Right now, the last one was in Stout just a couple days back. I know Eau Claire had theirs. And then I don't know if there's any more yet before state or if everybody's sort of taking a breath before we go into the large competition. Our press with all sorts of great stuff. I even have, and I'll send it to you, a list of Badger biographies and press books and the locations that they are attached to. So,
Awesome.
so you can get to the people who have attended today. And then, I'm actually part of this, Janet's probably part of this too. We have a speakers bureau where you can go and do some research on any particular topic and see if we have a speaker. These are mostly, they're either society people or they're private contractor types, so they're authors and such that you can have come out. And once we connect you, then it's up to you to schedule. We have different exhibits. I saw that We Stand on Your Shoulders is coming up here. And so this one is on LGBTQ history. We will always be here. So we have different exhibits for different themes that we lend out. And I think that that is still free of charge, or is there a traveling fee to that, Janet, from the traveling exhibits?
If they're part of History Makers Tour, right now there is no cost for those, otherwise I think they're $75.
Yeah, there is a fee because it's transportation and, yeah. Will it look like this?
Absolutely.
Possibly. It will be shiny and cool, and it's not going to be taller than the Capitol because that's the law. So you cannot block the Capitol view.
I like the old building.
Really? The red brick tile sort of
I
thing?
loved it. Yeah.
I worked in there for a long time and I didn't love it.
Well,
I'm sorry, I'm going way over time. I really apologize. It's lunch really soon. So.
They've destroyed history.
I know. Well, they did their best to take the pieces out. I mean, the education team was incredibly sad about some of our favorites that were built-in exhibits. You know, the lead mine and the Aztalan house. You know, they had to go down with the building because you couldn't take them out without destroying them. They've been there so long, they were brittle. You know. And then, if you're not signed up, you can sign up for the education newsletter. You want to see what our team is up to. And that's Shay, named after the Schaefer woolly mammoth vine that I started this whole presentation with. And I am way over time, and it is time for you all to have lunch. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
And I'll also get this document. Oh, why are there so many documents? There's only 2 open. So what I did was take this, and this is a series of questions you can develop for educators coming to your site based around the Wisconsin state standards. And so it just takes it and puts it in plain language about how you can talk to educators about what your site has to offer them. Sorry. Anyway, now I'm done, I swear. There.
Thank you, that was awesome.
All right,
You could probably listen to another hour if you wanted to go on for another
Oh,
hour.
I'd talk for another hour if you can guarantee. So, thank you for having me. Yep.
Here's one of your,
So-
one of them, I don't know where the other one.
I'm sure.
So, we're going to have,
Yeah, that's part of the history.
can you guys hold on for a second? Hey, we're going to have a working meeting, or lunch, after you get your lunch. So run to the bathroom now if you're going to, and then come through the line, and then sit down, and we're going to hold our business meeting during lunch. So I hope that works for everybody. I'm gonna ask you to go on that side so I can put burgers on your buns, and then when you get back over here, you can put your mustard and ketchup on, if that works.